Hi everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right. Okay. Okay. I'm using a new browser, so I hope this one works as well as the other one. You guys can hear me all right? Yes? Good? Audio sounds good? Uh, yes? Okay. All right. Sounds like no complaint. Okay. So we'll talk about why does Beijing fear a stock market crash the most? Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. Well, we are what four weeks into 2024, and China's economy hasn't had any good news. Evergrande is required to go through liquidation process in Hong Kong. Right, we learned that this week, and China's stock markets are facing tremendous selling pressure. So, of all the economic time bombs, I think the stock market crash is is the biggest time bomb that concerns the Beijing authorities. And the issue is political instability. So we'll talk about that. But first, because Evergrande has been in the news, I want to talk about the rippling effect of Evergrande liquidation. Then, before we get into why Beijing fears a stock market crash, I want to talk about the extensive market rescue efforts or maneuvers that Beijing has put in just to show how much they really tried. But it didn't work, obviously. And last but not least, I think it's very interesting to share with you why the Chinese are concerned about a major depression. I mean, the Chinese, despite the Chinese government's cover up and its demand to speak positively about the economy, Chinese people, many Chinese scholars have compared the similarities between today's China and the US in 1929. And this article actually was written by a Chinese, and I want to share that with you. So let's first talk about Evergrande liquidation. So it's been 2 years since its debt problem became public in August 2021, and Beijing has been delaying the liquidating Evergrande for as long as it could until now. So Monday, a Hong Kong court ordered Evergrande's liquidation. I think Beijing didn't want to deal with it because it's caught in a dilemma. If it saves Evergrande, then what about the dozens of other real estate developers that are in similar financial troubles? Will Beijing save them all? But if it doesn't save Evergrande, the risks of social stability can get out of control because the number of disgruntled homeowners. Mainstream Western media was positive about Evergrande's liquidation, saying that it's not a big deal when you compare to Lehman Brothers, um, which had a debt of 600 billion. Evergrande's debt is $300 billion against an asset of 240 billion, but I think its asset is overstated. I think its assets is not anywhere near 240 billion. It's overstated, but its debt is 300 billion. Lehman Brothers' debt was 613 billion. So so American media think that it's not going to be it's going to be substantial, but it's not going to affect American consumers. I cannot say that assessment is wrong, but I want to caution a misleading optimism um, that underplays the rippling effect of Evergrande's demise. So I'll summarize the rippling effects. The first, it will create a domino effect in China's troubled real estate industry. Investor confidence will drop to the bottom. Prices will fall, even though people know this is coming, but it's still a big difference when you actually see Evergrande's asset being liquidated, right? So prices will fall, and other troubled real estate companies will follow Evergrande's footsteps. So a vicious downward spiral will quickly expand negatively as supply and demand both have been wiped out. It used to be, it was supply problem, and now the demand also is gone. There's just no demand. And the second thing is bankruptcy of real estate companies could lead to the deterioration of the non-performing loans and capitalization rates of China's banking system, and the already cash-strapped local governments, which have been heavily relied on real estate developers and the local banks, will not be able to foot the bills or pay the government employees. And then the third is the impact on consumers is even greater, because real estate investment accounts for 70% of the public's total investment. I mean, um, Chinese people's investment. Many of them will lose their investment as prices fall. And millions of homeowners, maybe tens of millions of homeowners, will never get their home, despite having put down a substantial down payment, which is typically 30 to 50% in China. I think 30% is the lowest, and it used to be 50%. 50% is the required. I think it's 30% if it's your first home, and then 50% if it's your second or third home. But earlier, prior, the down payment is quite high. And a lot of them have been paying mortgages. So these people, this may trigger a social stability issue. So, but I think China's stock market, comparatively speaking, I think China's stock market is what makes the regime authorities worry the most. And before I get to why, let's first review the efforts put in by the authorities. So as early as last July, China's IPOs had been completely frozen and no new applications were being accepted. And on August 27th, China's Ministry of Finance and the Securities Regulatory Commission announced 4 major market-saving measures, including reducing the stock transaction stamp tax, tightening IPOs, limiting the reduction of holding by actual controllers, and restricting fundraising by listed companies. But the A-shares market continued to face selling pressure. And then on September 26th, the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges issued a notice. It's the same notice, but they issued separately. That restricts major shareholders from selling shares. And major shareholders cannot sell shares if one of the following 3 scenarios is true. 1, if the current stock price is below the IPO price. 2, if the stock price falls below the net value of the company. And then 3, if no cash dividends have been distributed in the last 3 years, or if the total amount of cash dividends is less than 30% of the net profit of the last 3 years. Last, regulatory bodies provided a window guidance, which is a verbal notification, not written one. It's a verbal notification that requires that shareholders who own more than 5% are not allowed to sell. So if you own 5% of a company, you're not allowed to sell, but that requirement is verbal. It's called window guidance. Anyways, so of course these measures installed more fears in people, and the Shanghai Composite Index fell below the 3,000 point on October 20th, right, a month after they put in these measures. I mean, less than 1 month after they prohibited major shareholders from selling their shares. And now 3,000 points is a emotional threshold for many retail investors, because it's the Chinese stocks because previously, every time when the index fell below 3,000, the government will organize some kind of a state efforts trying to lift the market up to be over 3,000 points. So that's kind of an emotional threshold for many people. And then on um, the 16th, Xi Jinping delivered an important speech at a seminar. And the name of the seminar is called Developing High Quality Financial Markets. The seminar, it was a 2-day seminar. The seminar gathered all the provincial leaders and all the ministerial leaders in Beijing, and they held a 2-day conference to talk about how to develop high quality financial markets. I think CCP's high quality financial markets is different from the type of quality that we would want to see, because what we want to see is transparency, right? It's a free market that has no fraud. I mean, it's open, fair trading platform, right? But I think CCP's definition of high quality means the market goes in the same direction as the party or as the party leader. So Xi Jinping claimed that the Chinese finance, China's finance is fundamentally different from Western finance. He made that claim. He emphasized building a financial powerhouse with Chinese characteristics that suit China's national conditions. A Chinese financial model, one that avoids the pursuit of ROI and hasty gains. I mean, anyone who understands stock market would think that that's just preposterous. I mean, how can you? I mean, the whole purpose of having a stock market, the reason people invest in stocks, is to pursue return on investment. They want to have a gain. So he wants to establish a stock market with Chinese characteristics that's not based on pursuit of returns. I think he's trying to establish an idealistic, patriotic stock market. But anyways, now on the day of his speech, the stock market reacted. I mean, it reacted to his speech and plummeted, continuing to fall the next day and reached its lowest point in nearly 5 years. So on the 18th, which was 2 days after his speech, Shanghai Stock Index went below 2,800 points. Right, I said 3,000 was an emotional line, and then on the following Monday, the 22nd, the Shanghai Composite Index hit a new low of 2,756 points. And now in the entire Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges, only 147 stocks saw gains, while 5,184 stocks lost, okay? With over 4,500 stocks falling by more than 5%. I mean, this is unthinkable. Think only 100, so 5,184 stocks lost, only 147 stocks gained, and over 4,500 stocks fell by more than 5%. And 105 stocks were suspended trading. And on Mondays, on the same day, the Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index dropped below the 15,000 point mark, closing at 14,961 and returning to the index level of 2009. I want to point out that during Xi Jinping's 11-year rule, the Chinese stock market plummeted from the over 5,100 points to below 2,800 points. And the Hong Kong's index dropped from the high of 33,000 points to half of that, 15,000. In contrast, in Taiwan, President Tsai Ing-wen, when she took office 8 years ago, Taiwan's stock market was at 8,100 points. Now it has more than doubled and is currently at 18,000 points. And looking around the world, almost all major stock markets are up. So then on January 23rd, Bloomberg, perfect timing, citing insider information, stated that the Chinese authorities are planning to raise 2 trillion renminbi through the Hong Kong Stock Exchange to purchase A shares of mainland Chinese stocks in an effort to stabilize the market. And these money will come from the funds will come from overseas, the money that the SOEs hold in overseas, from their overseas accounts. And then domestic, the authority will allocate another 300 billion renminbi in local funds to invest in the domestic stocks. But it leave the door the door open by saying that they're reviewing this. It hasn't been totally approved. So it was just a news to boost investor confidence. So following the news, both Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges experienced increases gains, while Hong Kong stock market showed a more significant rise. However, the uptick lasted 2 days and the trend is down again. So now let's talk about, I've given you the history since last summer, the struggle of the struggle of the Chinese market. So the reason I want to give you that history is so that you can understand the psychology and then the mentality of Chinese investors, because that's really the key here. So now let's talk about why Beijing worries about a market crash. Well, it's because of the size of China's retail investors who are active in the stock market and their ability to organize themselves and raise their voice unanimously. That's a threatening thought to the regime. All right, why do I say that? Well, it's widely reported that 80% of China's stock investors are retail investors, or maybe it's not 80% by number, but I think it's 80% by trading volumes. It used to be 80%. I don't know if it's still 80%. It may be less. It may be less now. It was 80% before the pandemic. I think it can be lower now. But anyways, let's say it's significantly higher than the U.S. stock market, which are mostly institutional investors. The retail investors are a smaller percentage, although during the pandemic that number has increased. But anyways, and the retail investors in China, there are, you know how many people there are? 200 million people. 200 million Chinese regularly invest in China's stock markets. Some people do this for a living. They speculate in the market and try to make some money. Now think about it, 200 million people. This group is larger, much larger than the tens of millions of homeowners who didn't get their homes that they bought from Evergrande or Country Gardens and Sunac and a number of other real estate developers. Excuse me. Sorry. So 200 million is a huge group, right? China claims to have 1.4 billion people, but I don't think it has 1.4 billion. It probably has 1 billion people, but 200 million or close to 200 million people is a formidable force. Now, not only it's a large group, these people are well connected and well organized. There's so many online platforms, forums, chat rooms for these Chinese stock investors. These people get online almost every day and share knowledge, insights with each other. And these are large active communities. And some of these people might have known each other for years. Now, comparatively speaking, the homeowners or even the bank depositors who have been protesting don't have any online communities. I mean, they don't know each other before they discover that their money or their home are at risk, right? So in fact, people don't know who else bought real estate in that community. there's no way they know that. I mean, they get organized afterwards. Once they find out that they're in trouble, they're not getting their homes or they're not having access to their bank accounts, they organize. But the stock investors are different. They are already organized, and they've been talking to each other in their online communities, and the bonding is there. Um, Now, the world doesn't really know China's economic truth because it's being suppressed by the government. The National Bureau of Statistics and various local government fabricate fake data, economic data. The foreign ministry and then are using, or other government apparatus use little pings to influence Western social media and media. State security and spy agencies are now charged with the responsibility for reestablishing market confidence. It's bizarre why a spy agency is charged with that responsibility. And then the Cyberspace Administration is censoring online comments and discussions on the economy. The police is arresting people who protest their economic misfortunes. Scholars, experts, and the so-called think tanks are promoting government narratives rather than providing independent analysis. So, for all the reasons I mentioned, we don't really know um, China's economic truth. However, the stock market is one of the few places in China in which public sentiment is still somewhat accurately represented. When investors collectively are confident, stocks um, goes up. When they are not confident, stocks go down. The government can manipulate it by using state funds or SOEs or whatever, but they can't do that for a long period of time. I mean, they can do that for a short period of time, um, but but for the long period of time, it's hard. So comparatively speaking, I'm not saying that's the absolute truth, but comparatively speaking, in the scheme of things, China's stock markets provide a relatively more accurate picture of the economic consensus of the Chinese public because of the size of the retail investors. Now, in the comments section of the news about the A shares sharp decline on the 22nd, almost all the messages openly criticized Xi Jinping without mentioning his name. Some people directly call for his retirement um, in the comments section. I asked Chris to provide all the links to these screenshots of these online posts. I hope he has time to do that. So I'm not going to show you any images because my images probably won't help you. So if he has gotten the time, he has put all the links so you can see all the images, all the links from this talk in the description section. So on the evening of this 22nd, in the bullet comments of A shares investors, right? They have these I don't know, what do you call that? Uh, they have these like moving banners where you what do you call it? There's a technical term, but anyways, you see these comments like flashing on the screen. They're dynamic. They're moving, um, and and it's shocking to see that there was a unanimous cry of U.S. stocks must win. It says 美股必胜, right? US stocks must win, or US stocks surely will win. And then the authorities found it and they censored the word US stocks. And so people can't say US stocks must win. So all the investors unanimously changed it to the beautiful must win. You know, 美国, US is called 美国 in Chinese, which means the beautiful country. So the Chinese often refer to the US as the beautiful. So the expression the beautiful must win, like occupy the entire screen. I mean, it was like, it was unanimous. Um, And moreover, someone posted a picture of a big fat pig, and the comments below were all shouting to slaughter the pig for the Chinese New Year. Xi Jinping is referred to as the fat pig in China. At the same time, one person posted that he had he had lost all his savings, couldn't survive, and were preparing to do something earth-shattering before he exited the market to teach a lesson to the Chinese Securities Regulatory Commission and to seek revenge for the hundreds of millions of retail investors. So now think about it. With the level of censorship and speech monitoring online in China, the above described comments and behavior is very bold, and the scale was impressive, right? So seeing such a scene of public condemnation of the authorities by Chinese stock investors was eye-opening for a lot of us. And I think Xi Jinping's economic policies have turned the public into rebels, and it's clear that the public anger is on the verge of eruption. Now, about these investors, they are not necessarily die-hard, extreme anti-CCP or anti-government individuals. I don't think so. They're really just everyday people who try to make some money in the stock market. So let me read you a post written on January 21st from Liaoning province. And this person said this, and he said, there was an expression called speculating in the stock market made me hate my country. I think that was a post. The title is speculating in the stock market made me hate my country. So this person said, this expression deeply affected me. I loved my country, but now I began to question, is this country still the same? I'm tired and depressed. I didn't speculate in the stock market to make a fortune. I have no other ways of making a living. Without money or a job, I devote myself to stocks. But the stock market didn't bring me any answer. It made me penniless and brought tremendous debt. I don't think I'm the only one. During the pandemic, many people lost their job and made a living by playing in the stock market. Data showed that 35% of the investors incurred huge losses in stocks. These losses will be their financial burdens in the future. When the poverty and the feeling of despair dominate our society, we can't help but ask, does our country deserve our love, or still deserve our love? Now, this person is very rational, you know. He isn't the anti-government type, but the message sends a very strong, has a very strong statement. I mean, now think about it. 200 million people thinking the same way as he does. And that's a terrible, terrible, picture to the CCP. So the reason why CCP is so nervous about the stock market crash is the size of China's unhappy retail stock investors. Their strong bonding and unanimous voice. This type of organization is difficult to dismantle. It's impossible for the CCP to take down these online stock forums or groups because there are spontaneous support groups. And if you shut them down, it's like shutting down the stock market, right? If you shut down all these functions where people can chat and talk, then people may as well just forget about the stock market completely, and that's like shutting down the market. But on the other hand, 200 million people venting their hatred towards the regime every day is a formidable opposition force in the making, I should say. So obviously, a market crash can trigger a worldwide economic recession, one that's similar to the Great Depression. and the Chinese are talking about it. A Chinese writer summarized 11 American social phenomena during the Great Depression of 1929 and suggested that Chinese be prepared for that. And if I'm going to read you the 11 phenomena, and all of them are happening in China now. That article is also in the link I think it was the last link that I asked Chris to copy. So it should be there. You can read it. So first, economic hardship. Okay, the first group is economic hardship. The stock market and bond market both crashed. Large number of businesses were bankrupt. People were forced to take pay cuts. The above text described the Great Depression of 1929 in the US, but the same text applies to China today. Right? Stock market and bond market both crashed. Large number of businesses were bankrupt and people were forced to take pay cuts. Number two, high unemployment. In 1933, the unemployment rate in the US was 25%. In China, youth unemployment rate is estimated by a scholar to be as high as 47%, and urban unemployment rate is over 20%. I did one program on that. It was 26% even. And that was based on data, I think 2 years ago, or at least a year ago. So it's definitely worse now. So that's number two, high unemployment. Number three, during the Great Depression, there was oversupply caused by weak consumption. The economic engine has lost the momentum, and this is exactly what's happening in China now. Number four, a large number of people lost their home and couldn't afford rent. Homelessness soared. Homelessness in China, you go to Chinese cities and you rarely see homeless people on the street. But now I've seen so many social media pictures about people, particularly in the South, sleep on the streets at night or in public places like train stations. And there are like huge number of people. And number five, large-sized family appeared when young people moved in with their parents and in-laws. China now has a profession called full-time sons and daughters. They're young people hired by their parents on a full-time basis to take care of them. Some parents aren't old enough to require full-time caregivers, but it's their way to financially support their children who have to depend on their parents for income. Number six, women couldn't find jobs. The number of sex workers increased. I recently saw a video on X showing young women lined up in a neighborhood, in a parking lot in a neighborhood, waiting to be picked. And they looked like residents of that community, waiting for clients living in the same community. I mean, that's the feeling that I got from watching. I couldn't verify the video, but if it's true, it's just so sad and so pathetic. And there's definitely an increased family dislocation, right? Number seven, birth rate reduced. People don't want to have children during the Great Depression, and it's same problem in China. Number eight, traditional aesthetics returned as women donned long skirts and more feminine attires. I can't say if that's happening in China now because I'm not there. But what I've seen is the green military overcoat has become popular because they're cheap. They're warm and they're cheap, and so they have returned. So to some extent, it's true. Number nine, reduced social events. During the Great Depression, people resorted to poker games, chess, and movies as entertainment. At the same time, they spend more time with families, and there's not as many social events as they were in the early 1920s. Number 10, There was a counter urbanization trend. People left cities and moved to the countryside and engaged in farming to obtain food. This has also happened in China, as migrant workers who can't find job in the cities return home. So more people have moved to the countryside. Some urbanites have also moved to rural areas. I've seen that. And last but not least, prevalence of depression and a mental health crisis. This is a heartbreaking subject because every day you see Chinese, young and old, um, end their life because they can't take it anymore. It's like it's everywhere. I mean, it's just so sad. And so the Chinese author said at the end, and he said, although the Great Depression in the US is now history, it's essential to have an in depth understanding of the event and the lessons learned. And quoted in it quoted the book The Great American Depression by Rothbard. This quote, it end with this quote. It says, the Great Depression was not caused by the government's laissez-faire policies, but by too much government intervention. Economic crisis is not an inevitable phenomenon of a market economy, but a general correction of the misguidance brought about by government intervention in the market. Chinese are very subtle when they mention the government because they cannot make a direct reference to the Chinese government, or the article will be banned. So they always quote other writers, and they use other historical anecdotes to make uh, references. So the fact that this article is getting a lot of traction indicates that there are quite a lot of Chinese preparing for a Great Depression. And it doesn't matter what the government say, or what the economists say, or what Wall Street analysts say. The Chinese people know firsthand the real status of their economy. And when they are collectively not confident, the Great Depression then becomes reality, right? If they all are ready to lie down and do nothing and just want to give up, then then the Great Depression really sets in. So I don't know if anyone can give Xi Jinping this advice. If you really think about it, if you really, I mean, he spent what, according to the Bloomberg article, what, 2 trillion? He plans to spend 2 trillion RMB, plus another 300 billion. If he really wants to save China's stock market, he doesn't need to spend any of that money. All he has to do is release Ren Zhiqiang, the real estate tycoon who is a princeling, who got an 18-year prison term because he called Xi Jinping a naked clown. If he releases Ren Zhiqiang, the stock market will be up without him spending a penny. If he can let us all know what really happened to the former foreign minister Qin Gang, with truth, I think the market will go up even more. Cost him nothing. But we know he won't. He won't do it. And that's why the stock market will suffer uh, more losses. And then that's why the 200 million retail investor in the Chinese stock market are or is collectively is the biggest time bomb that worries Beijing. Okay, that's all. That's all I have. All I have. Okay, let me see if people have questions for me. I used a different browser, so this feels a little different. Thank you. Let me see. I'll go through the super chat questions real fast. This looks different. All right. Okay. Wow, there are a lot of comments. Good. I'm glad that people are having a Oh, here from Wilson Dizzard. Thank you, Wilson. From Jean. Oh, thank you, Jean, for your generosity. All right, let's see. Um, from quail or speak. I sometimes I struggle to pronounce these words. I have a subscriber who sent me a lovely message telling me how to pronounce the word reveal. Um, and he said reveal is almost like saying the word feel, and it's not reveal. Uh, and I said, I that's right. I said, well, sometimes you get lazy because correct pronunciation. If you want to enunciate English words correctly, you have to use your muscles. And I said, sometimes I get lazy. You just, don't, you don't want to use your muscles. So instead of saying reveal, you say reveal. So, but I appreciate, he wasn't sure if I could get upset with that message. And so he said, if you don't want me to, if you don't want me to, tell you about this, I can stop. But I said, I appreciate that. Okay, so here's a name that's quail. How do you pronounce OWL? I mean, this is I don't know. I don't want to. Okay, value your research day from Australia. Well, thank you. Um, let me see. Okay, I'll take some questions, random questions. Nick Fury. Recently, YouTube showing China folks using public places and elevators as restrooms. Huh? That's awful. Is this a sign of economic depression or just lack of amenities in China or cultural habits? Um, is that recent episodes or is some old videos? I mean, there were YouTube videos showing Chinese um using public places as bathrooms. But are these recent? I think it could be a combination of a lot of things. I think it's a sign of economic depression because of the lack of amenities. The Have you noticed that there's so many natural disasters in China? Explosions, the collapse of bridges or the ceilings, or some section of the road. I mean, there are all kinds of disasters like that happening in China. Explosions, like every week or every other days, you see some kind of explosion somewhere. And I think it's the result of the lack of maintenance, right? As the government's budget becomes limited or became limited, I don't think they go through the necessary routines to do building maintenance or to do building inspections or infrastructure inspections. So that's why you see so many disasters, So that's scary. And I think the public bathroom may be the same thing. Maybe nobody cleans the bathroom, so they are not usable. And then China does have 1 billion people. And then what happens when people need to go? Um, but elevators, that's just too awful. That's just too awful. All right. Um, Jim Swoben, who can give she finance advice? Nobody. I mean, they can. I mean, he has his what? His economic czar is He Lifeng now. But first of all, are these people brave enough or courageous enough to tell him exactly what's happening in the economy? They may not be able to, or they're afraid. So um, they are selective in presenting their information to Xi Jinping. Actually, someone said this, made this comments that I thought was very fascinating and very true. You know how when you're a subordinate of of Xi Jinping or any high-ranking government officials, right? How do you manage upwards? I mean, in the West, it's a I mean, boss and subordinate relations is two-way. I mean, if as a boss, if you're not a good boss, then they leave, they quit, they leave you. So it's a healthy relation. You need each other to make it productive. But in China, people don't have the luxury of quitting, especially government officials. So when it's a top-down relation, when your boss keep telling you what to do and they give you, it's a one-way street when it comes to communication and commandership. How do subordinates manage upward? What power do they have to manage upward? Well, by controlling the information feed, the subordinates can become very powerful to manage upward when they decide what information to give to their boss. And that's when they show their muscles. So the question is, you ask me who can give Xi Jinping advice? Well, a lot of people technically give him financial advice, but what information do they really feed him? Um, f- you know, and then I mean, I think it's going to be based on their assessment of what's best for them. They're feeding Xi Jinping information based on what they think is the best for their job performance, not based on what's best for China or what's best for Xi Jinping. So, unfortunately, so that's why that system is counterproductive. Um, so, I thought that that's a very great observation, and I want to share that with you. All right, Lei from Pay Clark. What is your opinion on the HCEI equity linked securities held by South Korean investors? HSCEI. I'm not familiar with that. Let me know what it is because I'm not quite sure if I know what HSCEI equity linked securities. All right, so I'm not familiar with that at all. Okay, so Johnny Garner, this retail investor population seems to be a real bridgehead for capitalism. This is a ray of hope. Do you think is a good possibility for actual political reform? I think, yeah, I think it's very interesting because it is possible. Because what can you do? I mean, Xi Jinping's hands are tied. I mean, you can't slaughter all of them. You can't shut them up. You can't shut down their forum because if they do, they're just not going to invest, and then the market crashes, right? So this 200 million people become very powerful. Like you said, it's a ray of hope. Because if you slaughter them, I mean, any other one, like the homeowners, you could harass them. You can forbid them from getting organized online. Even the bank depositors, the government has been harassing them. But 200 million, even 150 million retail investors, what are you going to do? So you're right. It's a ray of hope. Alex Doll, thank you. Thanks for your work. Question: how exposed are these retail Chinese investors to offshore Hong Kong stocks? How exposed? Well, didn't we see there were a number of articles. I didn't mention that because it's all in the US media, also on YouTube. They are buying ETFs, like overseas ETFs, Japanese ETFs and the American ETFs. Um, and the prices have gone up so much as a result of the buying activities from Chinese investors. And so the Chinese government stepped in. They forbade them to invest in the overseas markets. So they must have some kind of access uh, to the offshore markets. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Mitsu, given Russia closed their stock market when it was in free fall, do you think China will follow the same example when fall happens? I think they will close the market if that happens. I think so. Ed C, do you think Western countries should put heavy tariffs on solar panels and EV cars from China to protect their industries? I think so. Because the Chinese, you know, like one of the predictions for 2024 in terms of economy, I think China will export deflation worldwide because of these cheap solar panels and cheap EV cars that are uh, oversupplied in China. So they're going to dump that around the world, and this by doing this, they're going to export deflations around the world, but not necessarily in a good way. I mean, it's deflation isn't good. Okay, light abyss. How much of an effect will the Evergrande liquidation have on China? Can they drag out the liquidation to somehow save face, or is it too late? And what's to be expected? I think the government will drag out the process as long as they can uh, to to um, to minimize the impact of the liquidation. And also, it's in the Hong Kong court, but most of Evergrande's assets are in China. So people are watching to see how they're going to handle the liquidation of Chinese assets, right? In a Hong Kong court. So I think they're just saying we're going to do this now, and then it's going to drag on because the government is not in the interest of seeing of having people seeing how Evergrande collapse, because that's a huge um, mental it's a blow to consumer confidence or real estate or any confidence that's left in the real estate market in China. So they don't want that to happen too quickly. um Thomas Wardrum, she can see how poor NK is, North Korea is, and how pro- pros- prosperous Taiwan is. Why do you think he follows only the bad examples? Is it only to keep the power? It seems to serve no one but she. You're right. Um, because communist leaders know that in order to hold on to power, you need to keep your people poor. Kim's grandfather told his son, who was Kim Jong Un's father, say that the secret to the longevity of your power is to keep your people poor. Once they're hungry, then they will come to you. They will obey you. But once they have money, once you give them money, they become independent. They want this, they want that from you, and then you lose control. So communist dictators are not interested in prosperities. So, and this is a concept that a lot of Western um, governments or scholars or politicians missed. Even when they do promise economic reforms, is to grow their key industries, is so that they can be more powerful internationally, but they're never interested in giving any prosperities to their people because they think that will weaken their rule. Digital Formosa. How the CCP effort all the projects they do: military buildup, supplying Hamas, BRI, and space race. Will U.S. India Pacific allies ever decouple? China could finish Taiwan by using trade stop. Um, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but everything you said here is true. But China could finish Taiwan by using trade stop. I don't think so. Um, I think Taiwan's export to China in the past year has significantly reduced, whereas Taiwan's export to other countries have increased. I don't think trade will finish Taiwan as you described. All right, let's see. Ben, Benjamin Elizer. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. China versus the West. Does trade war spell end to made in China goods? Probably, but has the West made up its mind to start a trade war? I just saw that Biden's top officials in the trade office, the 6 officials working for the trade representative, Dai Qi. I don't know her English name, but her Chinese name is Dai Qi, have resigned because I think these people kind of are disappointed. From what I read, they're disappointed with the progress they've made in the Biden administration, and so these people have resigned. 6 of them, and that's quite a lot. All right. If you live in a box, are you homeless? Am I? I'm not homeless. If you live in a box, are you homeless? Oh, you're asking in general. uh, what kind of box? It depends on if it's a nicely constructed wooden box. I don't think that's a home. We all live in a box, don't we? Our homes are like a box. So it depends on what type of box. Um, Mitsu, do you think American media will ever bring up Country Garden's danger of collapse, or are they still not serious about decoupling? You say yourself its collapse is more impactful. I think American media are trying to, I mean, I think the American media and American or a significant part of American government want to downplay the seriousness of China's economic um, distress. I think they are also interested in postponing this economic time bomb because they're not interested in seeing it being detonated before the election this year. So, because one thing we know for sure is when China's economy uh, collapses, it will send rippling effect worldwide, and American economy will be affected. And I think politicians and media are trying to tell us not to worry, but I think that's not true. We should worry. And the more you postpone that to the future, you're like sweeping under the rug. You're just ignoring the problem. You may as well face the problem and prepare, right? Okay. All right, that's all. I think I'll just take a few more questions and then that's it. Let's see. I think that's all. Oh, here's one. Alejandro Sudiro. Okay, I pronounced this name right. Is it easy for mainland Chinese to own stock overseas? Um, Anything in China is not easy. Nothing, I should say, nothing in China is easy. In general, if you ask, if you try to do things, if you try to follow the rules, nothing is easy. You cannot get anything done. And yet, every Chinese has broken rules. One, this rule or that rule. So, anything is possible. So if you want me to answer that question, Regardless of how many rules the government have set up, everything is possible if you know the right person. And they have all broken rules. All right. Okay, that's all. Okay. Thank you. I thank you for joining me and enjoy the rest of your day and rest of your night. Bye-bye.